Hi and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to focus on a great way to introduce your users to your applications, and this is called onboarding. And what onboarding is simply explained. So you have a simple explanation on a few pages illustrated by an icon or an image, and this is what we are going to create a nice material design. You can scroll through those different pages. The transition has a nice radial effect, and once we are done with all of our explanation, we can get started and we're in the actual app. And just a quick look, if you have a look at Dribble, for example, you can see a lot of different ways how you could implement a onboarding experience, and it's quite interesting to have a look at different experiences and tailor the one that is perfect for you. What we're going to do today is using a paper onboarding GitHub repository, which is a great project. So this is kind of what our application also looks like. And to get started, what we want to do is have a look at this GitHub page. The link for that is in the video description below. And to get started, we are using the cart file content to get a framework with all of the source code and all of the classes that we need. Carthage is just like CocoaPods, a dependency manager that is really cool. And if you'd like to know more about Carthage, have a look at the video now displayed in the upper right corner. You will find a lot of more information on Carthage in that video. So we're copying that line of code here, and then we can go into the text editor of our choice and save that cart file. And it's important that it's called cart file. And I saved it into a folder on my desktop called Onboarding Framework. And I'm going to now switch to my terminal, and here I am entering change directory, change to desktop, and to onboarding framework, and within that folder we're calling the command Carthage update. And what this does is it fetches the paper onboarding from GitHub, and it creates an Xcode project for us and uses that to compile a framework. This is going to take a second, and now we're already done. And what we have now in this folder is a Carthage folder with a build folder, and in the iOS folder we'll find a paper onboarding framework that includes everything that we need. So we can now create an Xcode project to build our real application here, and I'm going to call that onboarding. So let's just choose that name, onboarding. Next, and create that on the desktop. And what we'd like to do now is, since we have our framework here, we should also put that into our project folder. So I'm just copying the complete, or moving the complete Carthage folder into my project folder, and with that I can open up the Carthage folder, build folder, and iOS folder, and moving the paper onboarding framework into my embedded framework. So just make sure to select your project, your targets, and then I will drop that into the embedded binaries, hit finish. And with that, we have this as a linked framework and libraries in this section. And we have also added that to our project. And what we can do now is, for example, go into our view controller.swift file and import paper onboarding. And if everything went okay, then we can build without any problems. And with that done, I think this is already the most difficult part behind us. Now we can move on to the cool stuff, actually, which is creating those nice looking pages with those icons. And I have prepared some of the icons that we can use here, or actually all of the icons, but feel free to choose your own icons, of course, for your application, or even choose images if that conveys your message better. So what we do now is selecting our assets folder and moving, let me just close down those other folders and move all of them, all of the prepared icons, to our assets folder, and we have images for all necessary resolutions. Actually, the 1x resolution isn't that important anymore, but we have also the 2x and 3x version. That's perfect. So now with that done, we can focus on creating our onboarding screens. And the first step for that would be to create a new UI view subclass, or a subclass that actually inherits from paper onboarding. So we press Command N on the keyboard and select a new Cocoa Touch class. And I'm selecting onboarding view, or I'm entering the class name onboarding view, and we're going to inherit or subclass that from paper onboarding. So we hit next and create that class. And as you can see, when we have a look at the at onboarding, and if we also import paper onboarding here, and we then have a look at onboarding, paper onboarding itself inherits from UI view, so we can use our onboarding view just like any ordinary UI view. So let's go to our main storyboard and add a new UI view, and let's put that in the top left corner. And the paper onboarding requires some constraints, so we can't use auto resizing masks. So we need to press Ctrl here, for example, on the keyboard, click and drag to the super view, and hold Shift down to select multiple constraints. And I'm selecting leading, trailing, vertical spacing, and vertical spacing to bottom. So we have constraints to all 4 edges, and I press Return. And as you can see now, with those blue lines here indicating that all of the constraints are properly set. So with that done, we should have a look at the identity inspector and choose click on our view again, and also choose that as a custom class here, which is onboarding view. And it doesn't matter if it does not autocomplete here in that case. If you click on that little arrow here, you can see that we are moved to the correct class, so everything seems to be fine. And then we can open up the assistant editor and control click drag to our view controller class, and we're making an outlet for our onboarding view, just calling it onboarding view. All right, so now we connect that, and the onboarding view, to configure it, we have to commit some steps here. First of all, we have to add the data source to our onboarding view. There is a specific data source method. It's comparable to what you would do with a table view or table view controller. So what we do is we take our onboarding view, select the data source property, and add self here, and then we should also adopt to the necessary protocol, which is paper onboarding data source. And if we build that now, we get an error saying that our view controller does not conform to the protocol, and we need to add a specific method or a function for that, which is onboarding item at index. And if we have a look at that, this function enables us to configure each onboarding item. So this would be the first item, and it's divided into a large image, a title, a description, the colors for the title and the description, the background color, and also in this area you could specify a smaller image. I actually liked it that way, so I did not specify a smaller image, but you're free to do that with the paper onboarding control. So this is pretty cool. And if we have a look at the onboarding item info that is returned by this onboarding item for each index, you can see that this indicates the progression in which we have to feed it with information. We start with the image name, then the title, description, icon name, and so on. So this is what we are going to do. But as you can see, there is still an error here because we have missed one delegate function or one data source function, which is the onboarding items count, which returns an integer, and here we can simply return 3 because we want to have 3 onboarding screens. So you can hard code that actually, or you could also specify a plist that contains all of your that contains all of the information regarding your onboarding experience, like different images or different titles, different descriptions, and so on and so on. But we're going the easy way here, just hard coding the 3 items that we're going to use. And I'd like to suggest that we start with the information that we know. I already know how my background colors should look like. I also already know what kind of font I'd like to use and what size this should have. So what we can do here is define some constants for that. For the background color 1, for example, background color 1, we're using UI color. And then we're going to specify specific red, green, and blue values. So I'm using the RGB value here. So this is 217, but we have to divide that by 255 to get the float value that UI color requests from us. So here I have the value 72 divided by 255. And for blue, I'm using 89 divided by 255 alpha 1. And now we can actually just copy that 2 times. This is background color 2, this is background color 3, and here we have 106, here we have 166, and the blue value is 211, and here for the third color we have 168 for red, green 200, and blue 78. And these are the 3 colors that I'm going to use. So now I'm choosing a title font. So I'm using UI font here with a name and a size, and this is going to be our Avenir Next Bold in size 24. And since I know that this font exists, I can explicitly unwrap this. But if you're using custom fonts and importing them to your Xcode project, you should think about checking first if they are really available, and maybe go to a fallback font if they are not. And for the description font, I'm again using UI font, and I'm using again name, again Avenir Next, but this time regular, and size 18. And if you're wondering about the names of those fonts, just have a look at iOSfonts.com. Here you can find all of the installed iOS fonts that you can use directly without importing any font files, and these are quite a lot, so just choose what you like. And I just liked Avenir Next here. So with that font set, we can create our first onboarding item info object. So I'm directly returning that within an array, and I then put my object into some parentheses, and we're starting with let's have a look, with the image name. So the image name for the first one is Rocket, so I'm just entering that, and as a text I use a great rocket start. The description is going to be some kind of lorem ipsum, so I'm using cupcake ipsum here quite frequently because it's pretty cool. So I can just select that I want one very short paragraph, and I generate that. That's maybe a little long, so I'm using that one, copying that. This is going to be my description. Then we're following with the smaller icon that I'm not going to specify, so I'm just adding an empty string here, and then we're choosing the background color. This is background color 1, and for the font color I'm choosing UI color white, no, not UI font, UI color white, and for the description also UI color white, and then we use the title font and the description font. And if you're not sure in which progression you'd like to use that, just make sure to have a look at the information here. And I'm getting this information by pressing the Option key on my keyboard, and then you can see this question mark here, and I'm clicking here, and this gives me the necessary information. And to get rid of this error of our return line here, we should choose an element, since we are only allowed to return one onboarding item info object, we should, for example, return 0 to choose the first item, or we can simply use the index argument here from the delegate or from the data source function. And with that, we have returned the proper onboarding item info object for the proper onboarding item at index. Now, to have a look at what we just created, we're changing the onboarding items count to 1, since we have only created 1 so far, and then we're running this in the simulator. So let's have a look at what is happening. So here's the simulator, onboarding, and here we go. This already looks exactly as we'd like to have it, but we only have 1 item. So let's return 3 now. And I'm copying our complete object here, inserting it 2 times. Don't forget to add commas between them, entering quite a few lines here to distinguish between the different objects. And now we change that to brush, and this we change to notification. Here we change the text to design your experience, and here maybe stay up to date, and let's choose a shorter text here with something like get notified of important updates. And now we should also change the background colors. So here we have background color 1, here we should have background color 2, and here in the last one we should have background color 3. And then let's build and run this again, and now we should already have a very cool onboarding screen. And now we can already scroll through those items. We get this nice transition effect, and I think this is pretty cool, and a pretty cool control here, the paper onboarding control that we're using. But now the question is, now we are at the last page, and we would like to display our real application, or we'd like to be finished here. So what we can do is going back to the main storyboard, and for our purposes here, we could add different buttons. So if you would have different functions that your user needs to consent to, or the user needs to do something, you can add some buttons either here in the storyboard or in code. I'm going to do that now in the storyboard, choosing a button, and I'm dragging it below the onboarding view, which means that it is on top of it, and I do not want to have it directly as a sub-view of our onboarding view. So I have to take care here and have a look at what happens here in my view controller scene. So I'm now changing my button text to maybe get started. I'm also going to change the font to custom, choosing a veneer next here, veneer next. I'm making this bold, maybe increase the size a little, and then I'm also resizing my button, something like that. And now the problem is that I can't really move it around, because as soon as I start moving it around, it's becoming a sub-view of the onboarding view. So I have to use my keyboard actually, so this is kind of tricky. I have to get it out of the view here, so I'm just rearranging that. I like to be it in the center, so maybe somewhere around 120 pixels. Y position should be maybe 500. Width is all right, and the height is a little small, so let's increase that to 30. And then I'm going to set a auto resizing mask here, just to keep the distance from the bottom fixed here. And then what I'd also like to do is set its alpha value to 0, so that's actually invisible. And also let me change the text color to white. And then we'd like to create an outlet for our Get Started button. So let's do it somewhere around here. Get Started button. And what we can also do is going back to our storyboard and create a new view controller. So here's our new view controller. And we are imagining that this is our real application. This is our main screen, our overview, whatever. And I'm just entering a label here, and maybe in the top left corner, this is the writing, this is the app. And now we can connect those two view controllers together by pressing Ctrl on the keyboard, and I'm dragging from my Get Started button to the second view controller, and I'm selecting an action segue show. And with that, we don't have to write any line of code to actually present the second view controller, and we can now concentrate on our view controller class again here. And what we would like to do now is implementing a few more delegate functions actually. So we need to adopt two paper onboarding delegate, and also assign self as delegate here. So we choose onboarding view, delegate, set this to self, and then again some methods or functions are required, and these functions are first of all onboarding configuration item, then we have onboarding did transition to index, and actually before that we should have onboarding will transition to index. Let's start here with the onboarding did transition to index. So when it's finished transitioning to a specific item, we can perform another action. So if we reach index 2, which is actually our third item, but we're starting counting at 0 here, so 2 gives us the third item. What we'd like to do is perform a simple animation. So I'm using UI view, animate with duration, and an animation, let's say duration is 0.4 seconds, and it's really simple. I just want the Get Started button and its alpha value to be set to 1, so that we start animating our button in as soon as the onboarding transition is finished. And since we do not want our button to be visible in any other case but when we reach our third item, we could, for example, choose onboarding will transition to index if index is equal to 1. Then we want to perform an animation with duration, let's say 0.2 seconds, and this is the same animation, Get Started button, alpha and 0. What you could do here is first check if the we should check if the self Get Started button alpha is equal to 1. Only then we want to perform this animation. So come on, let me paste that right here. So only if our start button is currently visible and we go back, for example, then we want to hide it. In any other case, if we come from the first onboarding item and go to the second, we do not perform this animation. But if we reach the third one, then we definitely want to show this animation. And now let's see if that works as we intended it to. So I'm scrolling to the second one, scrolling to the third one, and here we go, Get Started, animated in, and we go back, it's animated out, and we go back again, and here it is. We press Get Started, and we reach, this is the app. So we would have our real application or our main application now in focus. But you do not want to display your onboarding screen every time the user starts the application, but your user has no choice at the moment because the initial view controller is, sadly but true, your onboarding screen. Although it looks cool, we should change that. And to make that possible, we're going to remove the initial view controller here. So I'm selecting my view controller and removing the entry point here, so there is no entry point anymore. And we're going to give our two view controllers here now a storyboard ID. The first one is called onboarding. The second one is maybe main app, just like that. And then we can go into our app delegate file, and here specifically into did finish launching with options, which is a function that is called every time your application actually launches. And then we take our window object that we have here already created, it's a property of app delegate, and we create a new window here with a frame. And for the frame we use UI screen and the main screen and its bounds, and with that we have a window. Okay, all right, so now we also need our initial view controller. So let's say we create a storyboard, and from the storyboard, so this is a UI storyboard, and then we have to initialize it with name. Our storyboard is called main. We do not need to specify a bundle, so just make sure that you choose the correct storyboard name, but actually main is the standard name. And then we create an initial view controller object, and to do so we take our storyboard and we instantiate it with a view controller, and we have given our two view controllers an identifier. The first one is onboarding, so we choose that identifier, and then we choose our window object and the root view controller, and then we use it as a initial view controller, and then we again use window and make key and visible. And if we now run our application, we should see our cool onboarding screen because we have just chosen that. And as you can see in the console below, you can it states failed to instantiate the default view controller for UI main storyboard file. Main, perhaps the designated entry point is not set, and indeed it is not because we have removed it. And here we have our onboarding screen, but now when we click on get started, we should actually do something to save the state that we have already had a look at our onboarding screens. So to do that, we will add another function to our view controller and to our get started button. So what I'd like to do is add an action for that button, just an action, and let's say save, let's say got started. And what I'd like to do here is create a user defaults object. So I'm using user defaults standard, and then I use user defaults and with a lowercase u, user defaults, and then set bool for key. And I'm setting this to true for the key onboarding complete. Then I'm copying this key, and then I'm using user defaults again and hit synchronize. And what we do here is we use the user defaults, which is a simple way to save small key value information to the device. So this is going to be persisted, and our app is going to remember the user defaults that it's set. So we can go back later to those user defaults and see if onboarding is already completed. And with synchronize, I'm just saving what I just did. So I'm now going back to app delegate, and we are going to have a look at the initial view controller, or we're going to create a user defaults object here as well. So user defaults, and I'm accessing it with user defaults standard. And now if user defaults and bool for key, and this was my key onboarding complete, and if this is true, what I like to do is taking my initial view controller and then instead using instantiate view controller with identifier, but this time main app. And with that, I made sure that, and this doesn't work because our initial view controller is the lat constant, so we have to change that to a variable. Let's build it again. And by checking the user defaults for the bool onboarding complete, I know if my user already has performed the onboarding screen. So now with that done, let's hit our application again and see what it does in the simulator. So I'm opening it up, I'm scrolling to my last page, I hit get started, and this is the app. And if everything went well, then I should be able to see that this is the app now directly when I start my application. And here we go. So this is one way you could go when you only want your users to perform the onboarding screen once, which is, I think, necessary if you want to give them a great user experience. I hope you like this onboarding experience that we've just created. I think it looks pretty cool, and it gives your users kind of a great introduction into using your application. And don't get the point wrong, though. A good app doesn't always need an onboarding screen. But if you have the feeling that it could point your users in a better direction, or if you need some privileges from your users, then put it into the onboarding screen and explain why you need to access photos, why you need to access the microphone, for example. This makes your users trust your application a lot more. And with that said, I thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.